Good evening, everyone, and welcome to EduTALK. EduTALK is a weekly virtual talk show created out of the need for a global learning community. And we focus on topics in education that directly impacts Caribbean nations and diaspora nationals working across the globe. EduTALK features teachers, principals, business leaders, and dignitaries, and also parents and students who share their experience and sometimes their expertise on critical topics facing education today with a common goal of moving education forward and our students upward. I am your host. I'm Dr. Dwayne Dice, and I'm the founder and CEO of Education Solutions International. Please visit educationsolutionsinternational.org for more information about this program, as well as forums, conferences, and talks, such as we have discussions with teachers and so on in our programs. Now, my guest this evening is none other than Dr. Nicosia Shakes. And she is hailed from Jamaica. So Dr. Shakes is from Jamaica. She's actually living and working in California. She is assistant professor of in the Department of History and Critical Race and Ethnic Studies. And she works at the University of California, Merced. Welcome to EduTALK, Dr. Shakes.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dice.
Yes.
Happy to be here.
Of course, yeah, a fellow Jamaican to find, where you are. So your background is Jamaican, but you work in the US. Give us a little bit about the work that you do, because you're working in the Department of History and Critical Race and Ethnic Studies. What is that? What is that really?
Well, my PhD is in Africana Studies. And I actually came to the United States in 2011 to do my PhD at Brown University. That's how I ended up coming to the US, and then I got a job here. Originally, it wasn't at UC Merced. I used to be at the College of Worcester in Ohio in Africana Studies.
Okay.
And then I moved to California to work at UC Merced in 2020. Yes. History and Critical Race and Ethnic Studies is a department. So it's originally history. History is the department, and then CRES is a program as part of the department. And so I am in the Critical Race and Ethnic Studies program, and essentially what we do is we teach and research about issues of race and ethnicity, but we do it from a critical perspective, meaning we look at how power operates in society. So issues of racism, issues of discrimination based on ethnicity, etc., 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 gender and sexuality, and so on.
Okay. So this is very crucial at this time in our life, especially this era that we're in, with critical CRT, critical race theory, and the backlash that people who are making to create equity and diversity and inclusion of the many different people who share different racial background in the US is crucial. How does that affect your work when you see things like what is happening in Florida or the South, when they're trying to pass some laws, a lot of policies on the book to stamp out critical race theory ideas? How does that impact your work?
Well, I think that it puts those of us who do anything on race, not necessarily people in Africana Studies, but anyone who studies race, it puts us in the position of having to constantly defend, and explain ourselves. I haven't been directly impacted by it at my university because there is a lot of support for scholars who do that type of work.
Okay.
At University of California and etc. So, however, I have to help and sympathize with and be in communication with other scholars in my field
Yes.
who have to be dealing with not just scholars at the university level, but also teachers. Most of the attacks that you're seeing against the teaching of race, which a lot of them are incorrectly calling CRT. So that is the other problem. It's mostly happening at the high school and elementary school levels, where teachers don't have as much backing to defend their teaching. I have to wonder why what they're calling CRT, why they're calling, so what they're doing is basically looking generally at any teaching of race and any teaching about US history from the perspective of Black and brown people, indigenous people, people of color, and then calling it critical race theory. Critical race theory is actually a very, very specific field of study that usually happens at the university level. So I think that they saw critical, the word critical it sounds controversial, race sounds controversial, theory sounds controversial to anybody who is an anti-intellectual. So they call it that in order to drum up support among the people who just don't want to talk about race. I will say that there is a pushback against it. So you're seeing a lot of activism in states like Florida, which is the main place that you have this official attack against the teaching of race. Students themselves are speaking out. And I have to comment on that. Students speaking out is crucial. It's really the students, it's really the children who make the difference, because they are the ones who will be learning these things. They are the ones who are paying tuition to go to these schools. So there is that response, which I think is very promising. The final point I will make is that as people of the global majority, Black people, indigenous people, Asian people, Pacific Islander, etc., we have to always be prepared for this kind of backlash. Every time you have heightened activism, like what happened in 2020, 2021, every time you have major activism against race, where it looks like there's going to be a change, and people come in with programs, diversity programs, and new courses on the teaching of every time it looks promising, and you have large groups of people who are speaking out against racism, it always throughout history is followed by a backlash, and we have to always be prepared for that.
Yeah, that's very, very true. It's very true. With George Floyd, we thought something would have happened, change it. So to my point, the question is, because I grew up in Jamaica too, just like you, and I came to the US about 13 years ago, roughly. When I was working in Florida first, though, they said that a couple of people will say to me that you're coming here to take our jobs, and I said, no, I'm not taking your job, because the jobs are here, and I didn't come here to work. I came here because my family was moving here. So I had a good job in Jamaica, but I came here and I'm working just like everybody else. So I'm not taking your job. Do you find that there's a difference in race talk in America than in Jamaica? This idea of race and sharing about race.
Yes, there is a huge difference. There's a difference when you're in a Black majority country or a country in which the majority of the people are not white. Racism is more explicit in the United States because white people are in a majority. So you will have race at the forefront of conversations about social justice in a way that wouldn't happen in Caribbean countries or African countries or Asian countries. So a lot of that has to do with the demographics. In Jamaica, though, we have a very strong awareness of classism and colonialism.
Okay.
In a way that you don't get in the United States because race is at the forefront. I do think Jamaicans recognize that to talk about class means you also have to talk about race and skin color. And of course, you can't talk about colonialism and the legacies of slavery without talking about race. So the conversation about race in Jamaica often takes place as part of a conversation about other structural issues, especially economics. Now we are having a conversation about reparations.
Yes.
And the conversation about becoming a republic. So it's usually part of another conversation. In the US, it is very explicitly at the forefront. There's a lot that we can learn from each other. It's something that I've always said. I think that we can and have learned a lot about how racism operates by looking at the experiences of people who live in white majority countries like the US and England and Canada, etc. At the same time, I think that people in these white majority countries can learn a lot about how colonialism and imperialism operates from people in the Caribbean and Africa. Because in our case, you have whole countries that are still being oppressed by European countries, by wealthy white majority countries, etc. So there's also the opportunity there to share knowledge about the different ways in which we are experiencing discrimination and oppression.
Yeah, that's a very good point. It's very good about learning from each other. Because you can see it with the colonial past. And later on, I'll talk to you some more in a different setting with where the idea of colonialism and getting rid of that past from us so we can move in a very productive way as a people, a very wholesome people. So that's a different story. No, the reason I started off with that because of your book, and you're an author of women's activist theater in Jamaica and South Africa. And you mentioned a few like African studies. And this book is focused on gender, race, and the performance space.
Right.
Yeah. Well, how did you come up with that that title? Let's start with the title. It's Women's Activist Theater in Jamaica and South Africa, Gender, Race, and Performance Space. Who inspired the title?
So the story of the title is interesting because initially the subtitle was the title. It was Gender, Race, and Performance Space, Women's Theater in Jamaica and South Africa. The publicity department at University of Illinois Press thought that in order because people search, when people go into a library, they will search for a subject matter and the books will come up. So they thought that the book would stand out more if the original subtitle was the title. It would be specifically stand out. So someone in a catalog searching for women's theater or something about Jamaica and South Africa, that they would find it easier than if the title was just Gender, Race, and Performance Space. So Gender, Race, Performance Space. The book basically looks at how women's theater practitioners in these two countries are using theater in order to educate about issues of racism, classism, sexism, and not just to educate, but to cause social change, to inspire their audiences to solve these problems. And I look at Sistren Theatre Collective, which a lot of Jamaicans from my generation who are interested in theater or the feminist movement and women's movement would know, there's also a project called the Letters from the Dead Project. Honor Ford Smith is the chief researcher for that project. And it looks specifically at violence in urban communities in Jamaica and how people memorialize it, in particular, women, women and men, but it looks at the work that women are doing to memorialize and to cause change in their communities. When I say women, a lot of the performances and rituals that influence Letters from the Dead come from revival and certain practices that you find a lot among Black women, even though the project is not. And I say this because my book talks about women's theater, but the women who are doing this work, even though sexism is there, racism is there, a lot of them are also thinking about their communities at large. So you have Sistren, Letters from the Dead, and in South Africa, Olive Tree Theatre Company, which is in a township called Alexandra in South Africa, and a women's theatre collective called the Mother Tongue Project, which is based in Cape Town. The reason why I talk about performance space is that one of the qualities that all of these theater projects and institutions share is that they're very much aware of the importance of the spaces in which they are performing and working. So some of them do mostly public performances, what we call site-specific performances, where you do a performance that's not in a theater. You do it on the street, or you do it in a nightclub or somewhere else where the audience is there and you go to the audience. In the case of Olive Tree Theatre, and it's sad that Olive Tree is no longer operating. The pandemic caused all kinds of economic problems for them. In the case of Olive Tree Theatre, which was co-founded by a Black woman called Insiing Makoro, Olive Tree is in a township, and the founder of the theater is very, very intentional about why this theater needs to be in this township that a lot of South Africans see as this place where you don't go, this violent, poor place that you don't go. So the Letters from the Dead project is also usually performed when it's in Jamaica, it's usually performed in downtown Kingston. So they're also very aware of the importance of doing work in the actual communities in which they want to create these change. So that's why the performance piece is important.
This is really, really interesting. So the body of work that you focus on, because I didn't see it like that. And when I read through the overview of the book, it's very interesting. It reminds me of going back in the past when you have these strong women in our culture who were doing stuff. They were outgoing, they're activists, they're performers in their own right, and they're bearer of history and culture. And these women carry over into our community a lot of this these values, deep values from our culture. What did you learn from them? You know, I know it's theater work, but I'm sure you gather some real nuggets from this work.
Well, I learned a lot so I am a theater practitioner. I have been involved in theater really since I was in high school. I learned a lot about theater techniques, different types of theater techniques, and why you would choose to do this performance this way instead of doing it the other way, how to construct a play, and so on. What I also learned, or something that was affirmed, something that I already knew, but doing this research really solidified for me is the importance of Black women's work, Black women's knowledge, and poor people's work and poor people's knowledge. The philosophies and the ideas that poor people, economically disadvantaged people bring to something, the importance of the ideas that Black women bring. So in the case of Letters from the Dead, for example, which is based on communities writ large, a lot of some of the rituals in Letters from the Dead, particularly in Jamaica, rely on mourning practices that you see among Jamaican people in general, but primarily among women. So the women of Hannahtown, the Hannahtown cultural group, which is mostly women, the work of revival women is very important to understanding how we as Black people see death and how we see mourning and memorializing, and how that will intersect with how we express ourselves artistically. If you look at a revival ceremony, a lot of that it's creativity. It's a ceremony, but it's also a performance. And you have to arrange the bottles specifically this way on the table, and you have to wear certain clothes and so on. And that comes from philosophy. It's not just we're doing this because we like it. It comes from philosophy. So I already knew about the importance of this work, but this research solidified it. What I saw particularly coming out is an awareness of, so we Black women have already been doing the work in feminism and womanism of letting people understand that we can't talk about race without talking about gender. And so on and so forth. What I learned was, we're talking about race, we're talking about gender, we're also talking about colonialism, apartheid, segregation, etc. And very importantly, the groups that I study see themselves as part of how their societies imagine freedom and democracy. So, for example, in South Africa, apartheid was just ended 2 decades ago. They are very, very, very intentional about why Black women have to be at the forefront of how you talk about building democracy in South Africa. And the same thing in Jamaica. So the research allowed me to kind of consolidate how I think about all of these different ways of thought, ways of knowing that we bring as Black people to thinking about freedom as women, as Black women, and as poor people.
Yeah, it's powerful. It's very, very powerful. And the book is Women's Activist Theater in Jamaica and South Africa, Gender, Race, and Performance Space. So where can people get this book? Where can you get your hand on one copy of this book?
The book is currently available on Amazon. It's available in hardcover and paperback. I need to tell people the hardcover is very expensive. So just look at the paperback. It's usually libraries that buy the hardcovers. You can also visit University of Illinois Press website. The book is available there, at Barnes and Noble as well. I can't say yet where the book will be in terms of physical bookstores, but it's on Amazon and it's on University of Illinois Press's website as well as Barnes and Noble.
Okay, good. I really endorse it. Women's Activist Theater in Jamaica and South Africa, Gender, Race, and Performance Space. So while we close our show, I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to us, all of us, and I'm hoping that people will learn something from this, because what we're gathering, what we're doing here is to see if we can empower our people, to empower them,
Yes.
to, because they have choices, and we can choose to sit down, don't do anything about this, and just go where the waves take us. Or we can be purposeful with our lives. We can give back to country, promote our people, and lift our people up. What are you a part of movement? Because this sounds like a movement, like it's an activist movement. Do you have the develop a long-term relationship with those you have worked with in South Africa and Jamaica? And if you have a movement that people can become a part of?
Well, I became a part of the movement for women's reproductive rights in Jamaica because I was doing research on Sistrin's work, Sistrin and Hanaton cultural groups' work to change Jamaica's laws on reproduction. So I became a part of the Partnership for Women's Health and Well-being in Jamaica. And so there are ongoing activist movements that are geared at women's health, against violence against women, gender-based violence, etc. The Partnership for Women's Health and Well-being. There's also We Change, which it's not a group that I researched, but people who I know who are a part of that network. Women's Resource Center, and so on. In South Africa, so I have continued my relationships with these groups because this research went on for a decade. So in South Africa, I'm not part of an activist group, but I maintain contact with the women who are doing the work in South Africa. I've actually been part of a book project. The Mother Tongue Project published a book edited by Sarah Matchett and Alex Hallegay, which is on Amazon if people are interested, where they looked at their 21 years of existing and what it's like to work in South African society. So I was one of the writers on that book, and I maintain contact with them. But you don't need a lot of resources to be an activist for social change. A lot of the people who are featured in my book are poor people. So I mentioned Insing Makoto, who founded a theater in a poor township. And she's from a working class background. She's a self-taught theater practitioner who founded a theater. And made a difference, even though the theater no longer exists. So whatever you can bring, just bring it.
Yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that, because a lot of people who are very, very poor back in our days and before, they were the ones who were making waves. All of them actually contributed more than the people who have money.
Right.
And even look at our songs, our Jamaican songs come out of that anguish.
The folklore and culture.
The starving and the oppression and so on. So yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Nicosia Shakes, for coming on EduTALK and sharing your views, and of course share your book with us. I really appreciate your time, and I'm hoping we can connect soon again for something like this. Thank you so much.
And thank you for having me.
Yes.
Welcome.
Yeah. Viewers, thank you for being on. I wish you all the best for this week. And remember, if you need information about the book, you can reach out to us, edusolutions, intl@gmail.com, or you can visit our website, educationsolutionsinternational.org, and we have information that you would need, and you need to get on board, because these are it's not a man's world, it's a woman's world, as the songwriter said, who run the world. So thank you. Before we go, how can people reach you if they want to, invite you for discussions or so on?
So the best way would be to just visit my website.
Oh, yes, give us your website.
It's nicosiashakes.com.
Okay.
So it's my name, Nicosia Shakes, one word, .com. And the information about me and my contact information are there.
Oh, cool. And we're gonna put a link on our website for that. For your name, nicosiashakes.com, so people can go on there. Thank you very much. And have a great week, everybody. Thank you, Dr. Shakes. Take care.
Thank you.
Yeah.
You too.
All right.